thank you all for coming today and for coming to the presentations. I hope you've enjoyed them so far. So before I start, I just want you to think about the first job you ever had. And if you haven't had a job yet, you can use mine. I was a beggar at a grocery store. Now I want you to think about your dream job. And if you don't have a dream job, think about a job where you'd be happy doing it. And just keep those in the back of your mind during this presentation. So the reason I chose to do this research is because of this phrase. Thank God it's Friday. Now, I might be a naive university student who's just about to enter the workforce, but I was disappointed that from now on, all I have to look forward to is the end of the week. And it turns out I'm not the only one who's disappointed by this. 75% of millennials want a job that increases their well-being and that they find meaningful. They don't want to be dreading Monday. So by the end of this presentation, I might not be having me saying, thank God it's Monday, but there might be a way to change this thinking. I think that way might be meaning in work. And you might have heard meaningful work or job meaningfulness. I'm going to be using the term meaning in work because this research comes from research by Michael Steger, who researches meaning in life. And meaning in work is work that is significant, positive, and has a eudaimonic focus. And eudaimonic is happiness that comes from helping others or purpose and growth, rather than hedonic, which comes from pleasure. Now, meaning in work has a series of benefits for both the individual and the organization they work for. The individual can get increased well-being, they can get a more meaningful and fulfilling life, and they can have reduced job stress. And the organization can have employees that are more engaged, they're absent less often, and they actually perform better. So some previous research has looked at what types of jobs are more meaningful. And some themes have come forward. So jobs that allow you to use your skills, jobs that challenge you, jobs where you're helping others. And this might be why maybe the dream job that we thought of at the beginning is more meaningful than the first job we had, because of these characteristics. But there's a reason why we have our first job and why we don't get to our dream job right away. So what if we're stuck in a job that is not so meaningful? And this is where I think a lot of millennials are struggling. A lot of us want these jobs that are meaningful, that increase our well-being, but we can't get them right away. So I thought maybe there's some things we can change within the jobs we have to make them feel more meaningful. And I thought of two things. The first was how we communicate with others. Now, although this might not be as flexible in certain jobs, and you may fall into one of these three categories, there are some jobs where we have some influence over this. With more technology, there's been a huge push towards telecommuting, which is doing the same job that you would do at the office, but you do it at home, and you use Skype or email or the phone to interact with other people that you would at the office. And we can see there's a lot of benefits to this. But if we're worried about well-being, we can take away all the ones that are about making more money for your boss. And we're left with less than half the list. And actually only one of these is related to well-being. So that led to my two research questions. How we communicate with other people at work influence our meaning in work? And does meaning in work or job satisfaction have a greater relationship to overall well-being? Because for the past few decades, a lot of people have used job satisfaction to measure their employee well-being, when it might not be telling us the whole story. So the second thing I thought of was we can change how we treat others. Just because I'm a beggar at a grocery store doesn't mean I have to show up grumpy to work every day. Although we do all know that person who's grumpy because they hate their jobs. So we might be able to change how we treat others. And we can treat others positively through pro-social behavior. It's been shown that outside of work, pro-social behavior can lead to increased meaning in life, which is related to meaning in work, but on a larger scale. And inside the workplace, it's been theorized that acting pro-socially, so helping the people you work with, can make you feel that you can create change, which makes you feel like you have a more meaningful job, although this hasn't been tested yet. And that leads to our last research question. How does pro-social behavior at work, such as helping, influence meaning in work? So we used two studies. Our first study was cross-sectional, and we looked at what does meaning in work relate to, and how does this compare to what we already know about job satisfaction. And then in study two, we used experience sampling, which I'll describe a little bit more later, to look at how does helping at work increase our meaning in work. So for study one, we had 202 participants from across Canada, and we used email and Reddit, which is a discussion thread website, to recruit our participants. And because we're interested in the different modes of communication, we asked how they interact with their customers. And we found that face-to-face interaction was pretty even with computer and telephone interaction, and 13% of these individuals had no interaction with customers. And when we asked how they interact with their coworkers, we see a majority of people interact face-to-face, with only 2% having no interactions with coworkers. We asked them a series of measures of well-being, both eudaimonic and hedonic well-being, and then we also asked about their meaning in work and their job satisfaction. So first, looking at interacting with customers and how this relates to job satisfaction. This is somewhat what we expected to see. So first, interacting with customers over the phone is most satisfying, then the computer, and face-to-face comes in third. So these interactions may be less satisfying. But when we look at meaning in work, face-to-face is tied for first. So even though we're not seeing the same patterns for job satisfaction as we do for meaning in work, this may influence how we interact with customers. And then we looked at interacting with coworkers, because it might be different for the two. So again, face-to-face comes in second, and the gray bar shows where the group average is. But then, when we look at meaning in work, face-to-face jumps to first by a significant amount. So although job satisfaction and meaning in work both lead to well-being, we're seeing different patterns for each. So why should this matter? Well, we looked at what job satisfaction was related to, and as expected, we saw it was moderately related to the measures of well-being we had, and it was negatively related to negative feelings. So the more job satisfaction you have, the lower your negative feelings. But when we compared this to meaning in work won on every measure of well-being. And when we look at negative feelings, it won by quite a bit. So the more well-being or meaning in work you have, you're a lot less likely to have negative feelings than if you were just satisfied with your job. So again, what does this mean? Being satisfied with your job can make you have more well-being and lower negative feelings, but finding your job meaningful can give you much more benefits in terms of well-being and greatly reduce your negative feelings. So going back to our research questions, does how we communicate with other people at work influence our meaning at work? Yes, it does. Communicating with customers face-to-face and over the phone was best. And when we were communicating with coworkers, face-to-face interaction was significantly greater in meaning in work than those other modes of communication. And when we look at does meaning in work or job satisfaction have a greater relationship to overall well-being, meaning in work was a much better indicator of well-being than job satisfaction. So employers have to think about this. If they care about their employees' well-being, maybe they should be targeting making the job feel meaningful than just having employees who are satisfied. Going on to study 2, we wanted to look at another way that someone can improve their meaning in work, and that was through pro-social behavior or helping. So we had a lot less people for this sample, and I'll tell you why. We asked a lot of our people for this sample. So we used an experience sampling method, which is a way of having people report on their experiences as they're experiencing them. And it's been shown that how we experience things and how we remember them later is different. So I sent people emails 3 times a day for 10 days, asking them, how many times did you help someone, and how do you feel about your meaning in work? And I asked them those same questions 3 times throughout the day. And this is what we found. So there was not a significant correlation between our individuals. So people who helped more did not necessarily have a more meaningful job. But there was a significant correlation, albeit small to moderate, at the within person level. So when we looked at just one person, when they helped more, their meaning was higher. And I'll show you more what this means. So let's say we have these 2 individuals. Let's say the blue worker is you working your first job, bagging groceries. And the orange worker is you doing your dream job. And we can see that they have different levels of meaning. And this may be due to the facts we talked about at the beginning, such as being challenged, having variety of skills, and helping others. But when we look at the individual level, let's say at time 2, because we measured them 3 times throughout the day, let's say both of our workers decide they're going to help someone today, and they're going to bring everyone roll up the rim. But we can see that both of these individuals, even though they have different levels of meaning, when they help someone, their meaning in work went up. Although, because overall level of meaning is not related to or overall level of helping is not related to their meaning, just because our lower worker brings a lot of Tim Hortons in every day doesn't necessarily mean that they'll get quite as high as our top worker there. So going back to our research question, how does prosocial behavior at work influence meaning in work? There was a small, moderate correlation between recent experiences of helping and feeling meaning in work, such that more helping was related to greater feelings of meaning in work, which we know is related to well-being. So the conclusions we drew from this study, in study 1, we found that meaning in work is a better predictor of well-being than job satisfaction. We found that meaning in work is influenced by how we interact with others, such as face-to-face versus over the phone or computer. In study 2, we found that meaning in work and helping are related at the within person level, such that more helping was related to higher meaning in work. So although you might not be saying, thank God it's Monday in a couple days, I just want to leave you with this quote. And it says, for in the end, it is impossible to have a great life unless it is a meaningful life. It is very difficult to have a meaningful life without meaningful work. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to wait until our dream job to have meaningful work or a meaningful life or even a great life. And that we have the power to change the job that we're in right now. Thank you. I want to say thank you to my supervisor, Dr. Derek Works, and especially the people who helped me with my stats.
Well done, Lauren. Can you disentangle for me the constructs of job satisfaction and meaning in work? I'm not familiar with that meaning in work scale. I've never seen it before. But to me, in my head, I sort of put those, I interlock this pretty closely.
Okay, and I think that's one of the fallacies that a lot of the previous studies have done. They say, well, why are they different? So meaning, or job satisfaction looks at, the questions are you satisfied with the pay you're getting? Are you satisfied with the with the relationships? Are you satisfied with your ability to use your skills? And just because we're satisfied with those things doesn't mean that our work is contributing to a greater good or makes us feel like we have purpose. And so you can kind of compare, because you're familiar with life satisfaction and meaning in life. So just because we're satisfied with our life doesn't mean that our life is meaningful.
Got it. Thank you.
So thinking about the differences in meaning job satisfaction for like the face-to-face versus the telecommuting or computer, the computer version, right? When you looked at them, you were also able to see what the jobs actually were, right?
Yes.
In those different groups. So are some of the differences attributable not necessarily to the method of communication, but the actual job itself? Are those two things kind of confounded and it's hard hard to tell whether the difference is, like, ideally if you had the same job and it was done face-to-face, or computer interaction, or telephone interaction, whatever, then you could see how the method of communication impacted outcomes.
Right.
Is there any way to disentangle any impressions? Because there might not be a way to disentangle the mode of communication with the actual job itself.
Yeah, I think that'd definitely be a place of future research where you have the same job and you're able to manipulate it, whereas this was like self-selected samples, so we weren't assigning people to a different group, and it was based on the job that they had already. So face-to-face jobs were like nurse, teacher, assistant, whereas over the computer interaction, we had a lot of salespeople, we had a lot of people who do computer programming. So it may be the job itself that's more meaningful, and then future research can look at when you're assigning to a specific condition, is there differences, I think.
You just have to start randomly assigning people to their
Your job.
jobs and then communication will figure it out.
Exactly.
Easy.